Hi everyone, welcome back to the Nduranz podcast. How are you doing, Tim? You all right?
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks, Tom. And how are you?
I'm all right. Yeah, been a bit ill, but yeah, on the way back now. Finally. So today, we're going to talk about your Gran Fondo that you did a few weeks ago. Now it's the Gran Fondo Sportful Dolomiti. Is that the right?
It's Sportful Dolomiti Race.
Race. I don't know. Gran Fondo.
Let's call it a race.
All right, a race. So you did it a couple of weeks ago now, but you also did it last year as well, didn't you? So I guess a good starting point is, how did you get on last year, and what made you want to come back and do it again? What lessons did you learn from that?
So yeah, I'm not a person that kind of races a lot, or does a lot of events. I do events mostly because so I can try out certain like nutrition strategy, like training stuff, and just like to get an experience of what athletes are going through. So for a few years, I've been doing Gran Fondo Stelvio Santini. This is kind of a few years back now, and then for 2020, I think I decided to do like a race. This Gran Fondo, that's also like was kind of a really long one. It was very challenging. So basically, the route is 204 kilometers long, and the elevation gain is officially, let me check, it's 4,900 meters. It has 3 pretty long climbs. And it's very challenging, obviously, from the nutritional perspective. So I thought I would actually do it. So 2020, it was canceled because of COVID. So it was the first year I did it was last year. And last year, I think I finished 21st. So for this year, kind of the plan was to do it better. So when I applied or entered the race, it was like autumn last year. I thought I would have plenty of time in the summer, not doing any experiments in the lab. But then I got a job with the World Tour team as well. So unfortunately, I couldn't train as much as I wanted to. So it was kind of an interesting period of preparation, mostly training indoors. And I'm happy to say that I improved the results. I finished 17th this year.
So a few places higher. I mean, I know you had a few issues this for last year's race, getting enough water and overheating maybe. So what kind of lessons do you feel you learned from that you took on this year to help improve?
So yeah, basically the race takes place in the the start of the Dolomites. So the altitude is not really high. Like the highest mountaintop of the climb is like just above 2,000 meters. And the altitude at the bottom in the valleys is very low, and it's very hot. Like it was very, very hot both last year and this year. So it's kind of in the middle of heat waves, on both occasions. So last year, I kind of, when when you do the Gran Fondos, you basically you don't have like any team members usually around. So it's mostly you and the feeding stations. But the best riders out there usually have the people around the road helping them with hydration. And last year, basically, I took the gels into my pockets from the start. So I was aiming, I think, from 90 grams per hour or something like that. But water-wise, I didn't have anyone on the road. So I had to stop and think about stop on the feeding stations and try to get some water. And that wasn't working very well because on a few occasions, I basically ran out of water and my power just dropped on those occasions. And also the pacing was very wrong. last year I started the race and I was leading the race. After the first climb, I had like 5 minutes of an advantage over the next rider. Only to like find out later that I probably started too fast and I burned out. And yeah, I tried to like improve this, like correct those mistakes from last year. That was kind of the plan. And certain things went very well, and certain things didn't go very well. So yeah, it was kind of hit and miss.
So the bottle handing up practice that we did a couple of months ago came in useful, did it?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, this year. So one of the things the improvements I did for this year was I got connected to some to a team, to a cycling team, the Rosa Santini, which I'm very thankful to, because I had their support on the side of the roads. Basically, I was able to get the water bottles from them on 3 places that were like perfectly like well thought out, so that I was never thirsty. So this was kind of greatly improved. So I started with 2 water bottles. So 1 water bottle and 1 energy unit drink bottle. And then I was receiving the bottles on the regular intervals, so that I was never actually running out of fluid, which was really great in terms of how I felt on the bike. And from that perspective, yeah, everything was fine. So one of the things I usually do on those very long days in the saddle, especially in the summer, is that I kind of rely solely on gels, and I forget about the drink, like the energy unit drink or anything else, because I really hate a sweet taste in the mouth. So basically, I started with I think it was 1 energy unit in a bottle, from just for the sake of like, because it was early in the morning, so the heat was not too high. And yeah, I was still able to drink the carbohydrates, but later on I just relied on water, and I had, I think, 14 gels in my pockets. So my jersey was very heavy. But yeah, I was aiming for 90 grams an hour, and I achieved 90 grams per hour in the end, which was great. So the fueling wise, everything was working perfectly well. And I got the water as well, which was also great. And I really like the kind of do hydration and nutrition separately in the summer, because this kind of allows me to drink when I'm thirsty and eat on planned intervals. Because if I had like the carbohydrates in the drinks, then if I'm thirsty, I might want to drink more, but then I also get more carbohydrates in the system, and I don't perhaps want that, or just it's very difficult to then plan everything out as in the way you want. And also like that sweet taste in the mouth is horrible. I hate it. So yeah, I had a gel and then
hates the sweet taste.
Yeah, so I had a gel and then just some water over it, and yeah, it was working pretty well. So I always like do this in the summer. And the other day I was doing some planning for talking to a World Tour rider on a national championships in Italy, and I think he had 15 water bottles, and he also just relied on bars and gels, and yeah, he was saying it was working perfectly well for him as well. So this is kind of like a modification I usually do. So no carbohydrates in the bottles, only gels.
And when it's really hot, you can dump it over your head as well and get a little bit of extra cooling there, especially if it's a nice, fresh, icy cold one.
Yeah, although nice. I don't want to like do that in the summer, because usually I don't have so much water available.
Yeah, if you're in a race and you're doing it every lap, say you're an Italian rider, I guess if he's getting 15 bottles, it's getting handed up to him pretty regularly, so you can maybe afford to do that.
Yeah.
So you got your fueling and your hydration improved quite a lot from last year. Talk us through the heat acclimation that you did, because obviously you're training quite different being based in Birmingham this year, being a lot busier, like you say, not being able to go out and do the long rides maybe that you could do last summer when you were back in Slovenia. How did you sort of take advantage of the fact that you've got the heat chamber there and change your training based around that?
So yeah, this was kind of pretty like interesting and like pretty challenging. So I really didn't know how things will go for me. Because one of the problem I have here in Birmingham is that the longest climb I have takes me 8 minutes, which is nowhere near like an hour and something. As I get in in the race, I got in the race. So I was kind of trying to figure out how to train, how to prepare myself. And in the past, like a few years ago, I did like Gran Fondo Stelvio Santini, which was basically just training indoors, purely indoors. No training outdoors was allowed. It was just a kind of an experiment. So I was kind of certain that this would go well this year as well. So I think on average, I probably did one outdoor ride per week, like on Sunday, a longer one. Otherwise, everything was indoors. But then the big challenge was obviously the climate, because in the UK it's pretty the summers are pretty mild. The temperatures are like in 15, 20 from 15 to 20
having
degrees.
A heat wave next week. None of that.
Yeah. So basically I needed to do some kind of preparation for the heat, because last year I knew that it was super hot and I expected the same for this year. So I said, well, let's do some sort of heat acclimation. I'm pretty lucky that I have access to a heat chamber here at the University of Birmingham. So with the coach, we kind of decided to do 6 training sessions in the heat chamber. So we know that like probably like 5 exposures to the heat would be enough for me, for like a highly trained person. So we did in the first week, so 3 weeks before, we started 3 weeks before the race. Basically in the first week, we did 3 exposures. So 3 sessions of, I think it was 2 hour long, in the heat chamber. Conditions were around 40 degrees and 25 to 30% humidity. And I got the core temperature in most sessions to around 39 degrees. So very hot. And yeah, basically I did 3 sessions in the first week, 2 sessions in the second week, and 1 session before traveling to Slovenia, just to kind of maintain that exposure. And I think that worked really well. So when I got to Slovenia and I did the first 2 rides like outdoors in the middle of the day, my mom was saying, are you mad? You're going to ride your bike in the middle of the day? And I was like, yeah, it's not hot at all. It's like, it's just normal. So basically heat acclimation actually worked very well. Yeah, so that part was like kind of sorted and went really well, I think. Training wise, I also think that the coach with prescribed the training sessions did a really good job, because I was really concerned, because obviously like I can't really do really long efforts here. It's boring to do them indoors. It's very painful for the brain mostly, because it's kind of can't imagine doing like 60-minute long climb indoors. So we did a lot of sweet spot this year, like just below the threshold. And it was working pretty well, I think. But I think the most important part was obviously the heat acclimation, because that really helped me to not to suffer in the race.
Yeah, that sounds like a fairly similar protocol that one of the para athletes I coach used in the run up to Tokyo last year. So she started a little bit further out, I think a month or so before, did a 2-week block similar to you. I think it was 6 sessions over those 2 weeks, and then just a week before going out to Tokyo in the holding camp, they did a couple of short top-up sessions in the heat chamber. Did you do any kind of top-ups of that with passive heat training, like jump into a hot bath afterwards, or or anything similar to that to try and still get that heat effect, but without obviously you're compromising the training by riding at 40 degrees. You're not going to be able to get much quality. Did you do any passive heat stress on top of that?
No, we only did the active heat exposures. And one of the things that we kind of figured out a few years ago, because I've been doing this heat acclimation for a number of years now, and one of the things we figured out is that heat on its own, and research is now confirming this, is a really good training stimulus. So despite the power being in the chamber 100 watts lower for the same heart rate, basically the response or the adaptations from these kind of training sessions can be even higher. You also need some more recovery, but it was just fine. So the training volume and basically the intensity also got reduced because of that, but we were aware of that and we were like, okay, that's perfectly fine. It's going to work still very well. And I didn't do any passive heat acclimations. I thought that 5 sessions, active ones, would be enough. And that would be just additional stressor that I don't really want. I think I did passive heat acclimation a couple of years ago. I didn't really like it, to be honest, hot bath. I hated it actually, because it's also time consuming, because you do the training session and then you need to go into the heat bath and it just adds on the time. Whereas I'm really constrained with the time at the moment. So doing this sort of just active heat acclimation was working really well. But yeah, I know it's kind of one of the things is, I'm really lucky because I can do this. So for instance, last year I was doing something at home and in the lab in Slovenia without a heat chamber. We actually heated up the room. So I was able to do the heat acclimation still, the active one. And now recent evidence suggests that you can actually just wear more clothing and do the heat acclimation in pretty mild climates as well.
Yeah, as long as you're increasing that heat stress, whether it's from sat in 40 degrees or from the stress of exercise and not being able to cool from wearing the clothes, or the passive heat stress, you're still getting a similar benefit from that. And there's been some recent research looking at heat acclimation and showing that can improve performance in temperate environment as well. Apart from sort of measuring your core temperature for safety, I guess, partly throughout the sessions themselves, did you take any measurements before and after the heat acclimation period, sort of looking at any other performance markers that might be relevant for performance in a temperate environment rather than just heat?
No, not this year. So we did this kind of a short experiment a few years ago for the Gran Fondo Stelvio Santini. So the idea was there in that year, I was a PhD student here in Birmingham at the time, and we did kind of strictly polarized training leading to this race, strictly indoors. So I even did I think the longest session I did was 6 hours indoors. Wow. Yeah, it was a crazy experiment. But yeah, one of the things we did was basically 5 weeks of heat acclimation, of heat training. And the idea was to actually promote the adaptations, not just get heat acclimated, but also improve performance by doing heat training. And at the time, there was not a lot of evidence supporting this, but we thought, let's give it a try. And mechanistically, it made sense. So the idea is actually with heat acclimation, you increase the plasma volume. So you reduce the hematocrit of the blood. And reduced hematocrit of the blood should trigger the production of red blood cells. So you should get an increased red blood cell number in a few weeks. But we know from altitude acclimation training that you need at least like 3 or 4 weeks for red blood cells to actually increase in the number. So we kind of did 5 weeks of heat acclimation at a time, and it worked very well. So I can't remember like the performance improvements I got, but they were massive. So the FTP and the tests we did really improved massively. This year we didn't go down that route because simply it was really hard. Like training in the heat week after week is very hard, and I just didn't have this much time. So I just decided to do like heat acclimation for the sake of heat acclimation. But I believe that heat training can be effective if done right. So one of the things we kind of had to think about at the time was how to reduce or manage the reduced intensity in the heat chamber. So the intensity was really low, but just so that like the core temperature was up to sufficiently like high numbers, and that the heart rate didn't go above the first threshold, because I was training polarized at the time. It worked really well. This year we decided for a different approach, and I think it worked as well also. So
this year were you doing some more intensity during the heat sessions as well, or were they strictly pretty controlled as well, and you were just getting your intensity in the other sessions?
So because I was not like training strictly polarized, I kind of let the heart rate to kind of be in the sweet spot area. So it was like probably heart rate around 150 to 160. Although that was really hard. So it was kind of around the first threshold was the heart rate. And I kind of clamped usually the heart rate and then slightly be dropping the intensity so that the heart rate didn't go too high, because obviously these were just like a supportive training sessions, because the main training sessions were still like interval work in my kitchen at home on my kicker. So I didn't want to like those sessions to suffer too much.
Yes,
because obviously the recovery time is increased if you do like such hard sessions. But I think we managed pretty well.
And you weren't doing a huge amount of volume in the run up to the Gran Fondo, but did you taper back in that last week or so as well? Did you decrease the volume, but you're still trying to keep that intensity from your interval sessions?
I can't really remember what the volume was, but I think I was doing like on average around 15 hours a week, which is not massive. I was probably doing more last year because I was training outdoors, but because it's kind of also very difficult to compare my training volume to people that are training outdoors, because I think that training indoors is more like efficient because the power is constantly on. You don't freewheel. You're all the time under like the load. So I can't really compare how this would equate to outdoor volume, but we had a 10-day taper period with some intervals and some hard work. We found out like in the past that I don't really work really well if I'm too fresh, if I have too much rest. So we continue to do some kind of intervals throughout that week. Just perhaps not like the frequency of the high intensity work was high, but the amount of work was not really high, so that they didn't get too fatigued. I was just like, fresh, just testing the legs, I guess.
So we've talked about lessons you learned from last year and how you've adapted your preparation for this year. On the day itself, how did that go? And did you learn any more lessons from that if you went and did it again next year, you'd change things again?
Yeah, I'm laughing because when you think like you fixed one problem and then you want to do some more advances, you just hit another problem. And I did that this year. So yeah, one of the things I decided to do this year was to go with tubeless tires to kind of reduce the rolling resistance. And yeah, that didn't went really well. So basically, I have two bikes. One bike is here in the UK, and one bike is at home. They're basically the same bikes. For the sake of so I can just swap them and just use both of them whenever. And a friend of mine installed tubeless tires to my bike in Slovenia. The tires were a couple of months old, so they were tested and they were like perfectly fine. And I arrived in Slovenia 3 days prior to the race, so I was able to do a couple of rides before that. And for 2-hour-long rides that I did, the pressure was perfectly fine. But then on Saturday, so the day before the race, I started noticing because that there are a lot of bubbles on the sidewalls of the tires from the tubeless on the rear tire, and that perhaps the tire is actually leaking. So I kind of expected that perhaps the next day I might have problems because of dropping pressure in the tires. And but I didn't bother doing anything like putting the inner tube in. So I just I was just testing my luck. And basically it was fine for the first couple of climbs. But then I started noticing that I have a pretty empty rear wheel, and probably in the finish I had 3 bars of pressure, so half of the pressure from the start, and I could actually hear and feel it. It was very bouncy, and the tire was not normal, and I probably lost quite a lot of time because of that. I was pretty slow towards the end of the race, but
So the big improvements went well with the heat acclimation, the pacing yourself better, getting the hydration right, but the marginal gains of the slight reduction in the rolling resistance maybe from the tubeless led to the downfall this year.
Yeah, so basically the result, I was 21st last year and 17th this year. So performance, the result was better. It was also a hotter day than last year. And the overall time was exactly the same. I think there was 1 minute difference, which is negligible. Doesn't really matter. So yeah, that was basically the same, but I think it would have been much better had I not have this problem. So yeah, I always learn. And it's kind of fun because you learn something new, and you also have now I look forward to the next year to improve this and try to get a better result.
But you'll be going back again next year, not on the tubeless, or at least on the correctly installed tubeless maybe, and go and try and improve again, or
probably hopefully Continental now sends me a tire that's actually holding the pressure. Perhaps for next year I might return to Sportful Dolomiti. I'm very tempted. I know the roads very well now, and
all right, so I think that kind of comes to the end of the podcast for this weekend, for this episode. We'll be back soon, I guess, maybe talking about the Tour de France game. I know we did a lot about the Giro last time, so we don't want to go and cover the same old ground again, so we'll have to think of a different angle for that maybe. But look forward to speaking to you soon, and enjoy watching the tour and working on the tour.
Yeah, thanks. I'll try to feed them my athletes well. And talk to you soon.
Speak to you soon. Cheers, Tim.
Bye.
Bye-bye.